Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being on time. We are recording this meeting, so other folks who can't be here tonight can watch and listen in later. I really want to thank everyone for being here, everybody in our audience. I also want to thank all our panelists, and especially City and Borough of Juneau Mayor Beth Weldon, Kevin Swanson from Representative Young's office, and Caleb Froelich from Senator Murkowski's office for joining us to offer some opening remarks on the state of the infrastructure bills moving through Congress right now. As we talk about these infrastructure bills in Southeast Alaska, though, I want to start by acknowledging that I'm tuning in from Shikakwan lands here in Sitka, Alaska, and that all of Southeast Alaska, or the vast majority of it, is Tlingit land. And when we talk about infrastructure for our future, we need to acknowledge the many thousands of years of Indigenous history here, and that will continue to be here for hopefully thousands of years to come. My name's Matt Jackson. I'm the climate change organizer for Southeast Alaska Conservation Council, and it is my privilege tonight to get to moderate this panel. But without further ado, I'm going to talk about a few technical details. One, you may have noticed that you can't unmute yourself. That's because we are expecting a pretty large audience, and we, out of respect for our panelists, we don't want to have background noise. But we do encourage you to be active in the chat to ask questions. Introduce yourselves if you like. We will get to the question and answer section of the town hall after we hear from those speakers, Mayor Beth Weldon, Kevin Swanson from Representative Young's office, and a representative from Senator Murkowski's office as well. So with that, I'm very pleased to pass the mic to Mayor Beth Weldon for some opening remarks. Thank you, Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Matt, and hello to everyone out there. I'm pleased to welcome you to this town hall on infrastructure needs and opportunities for Southeast Alaska. This event is a great chance for us to receive better information on the possibilities for our communities created by potential new federal funding, and for us to share information on our community's needs and interests. We will be hearing from local experts on 4 areas of infrastructure development critical to Southeast's future: improvements to the ferry system, expanding broadband, renewable energy incentives, and funding for rural energy infrastructure. I'd like to thank the event's co-sponsors, which include JEDC, the Renewable Energy Alaska Project, SEACC, Renewable Juneau, Inside Passage Electric Co-op, the CBJ Commission on Sustainability, Tlingit-Haida Central Council, Gold Belt, and Juneau Hydropower. Juneau has benefited in recent years from infrastructure opportunities in the regular federal budget. For instance, we have successfully competed nationally for funding for new electric buses that will help us reduce operational and maintenance costs while contributing to our climate and renewable energy goals. Juneau is a leader in the adoption of.
I'm sorry, Mayor Weldon, you muted in mid-sentence. You might have pressed the wrong button.
Actually, it said that my host muted me, so I'm not sure where I was, but I'll start with electric vehicles because we're real proud of that. Juneau is a leader in the adoption of electric vehicles. We are hopeful that the new legislation will provide additional funding for electric vehicle chargers, as well as electric transit buses and school buses. We have also applied for a major funding grant for dock electrifications. Finger crossed, our clean hydropower makes us strongly competitive for grants that emphasize clean energy. CBJ is also funding work to support and encourage residential energy efficiency and heat pump installations through Alaska Heat Smart. This program can save homeowners money on heating costs and keep more dollars circulating locally. We are hopeful that infrastructure funding can broaden this effort and help us do more to reach lower income households. Finally, there's no question that we can all benefit from federal funding for improvements to the ferry system. Thank you all for participating today. I'm looking forward to listening and learning.
Thanks so much, Mayor Weldon. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Kevin Swanson from Representative Young's office to speak about where those infrastructure bills are at in Congress. Thanks so much for being here tonight, Kevin. I know it's late on the East Coast, and we really appreciate you coming in for all your work in Representative Young's office. and also for the recent letter of support for that dock electrification project that Mayor Weldon mentioned. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, appreciate the invitation. And it was just my pleasure to swing through Juneau a little bit earlier this month and had a great time, and was a pleasure to get to see Southeast. And I also had the opportunity to, for the first time in my tenure, to ride the AMHS. So let me sort of break my comments up into two parts here. I'll start with the procedural stuff, kind of where the ball is on the field for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then try and go to some of the substantive issues that you've asked us to address here. So starting with the, sort of where the ball is on the field, where we're at, I have to give great deference and kudos to the Senate. This bill was drafted in the Senate. Senator Murkowski was part of the working group that worked on the bill, and they did a great job in drafting a number of provisions, a cornucopia of provisions, I would say, that are going to be provide a great windfall for the state upon enactment and as these programs would be implemented. So when the Senate passed the bill on the 10th of August, it sent it to the House of Representatives. It's up to the House of Representatives to consider the bill, and then it would go to the president for signature, obviously. So under the tentative agreement we have here, after some rigmarole last week, we have a rule that would set a standalone consideration for the bill on the 27th of September. That is what is currently agreed to, and it is subject to change. So Congressman Young has, been supportive of the process in the sense that this is going to be a good bill for Alaska. We would like to see the bill considered as is, in terms of there not being any subsequent amendments to it or changes to it. That, in our view, gives the bill the best chance to be enacted into law and signed by the president. So we're hopeful that the bill will be considered in or on around the 27th and would pass the House of Representatives and enacted into law. That is all subject to how things are going with respect to the reconciliation track of things and how the House Democrats and Speaker Pelosi want to proceed on that front. I would say, Representative Young is one of the few Republicans who I believe would, support the bill, even though it's being considered in close quarters with the reconciliation package. So it all depends, in terms of how reconciliation goes, how many votes does Speaker Pelosi have to pass the bill, where her moderates are, where her progressives are on it. But we're extremely hopeful that, again, that the bill would be brought up standalone. It will be under a Crow's rule. The House will not have the opportunity to amend it, and we can just pass it and send it off to the president and then get it enacted. So that's sort of like the state of the state on where the bill is in the process. Going to the substantive part of the bill, I would say, this is really a historic bill that Congress, has been considering and working on over in the Senate. It's a 5-year surface transportation reauthorization bill, so what we would call a highway bill, coupled with a lot of historic investments in different programs. A lot of these programs you've mentioned, and I'll try and hit the highlights, but as it relates to the Alaska Marine Highway System, Senator Murkowski and her team were able to do an incredible job in securing additional funds for the ferry system, which are traditionally allocated by formula, and increasing the flexibility and fungibility of those funds. So traditionally speaking, federal funds for ferries only go to capital investments, right? So those are things for building docks, building new ferries, repairing ferries, but didn't go to the operation and maintenance of the system. So these provisions within the bill would allow, for the first time that I'm aware of, those funds to be used for operations and maintenance. That's a huge kind of precedent to be set on a national level, and should give the AMHS a lot more flexibility in how to budget and fund the system. Secondly, she also was able to secure about a $200 billion nationwide program for almost an essential ferry service. We in Alaska are great recipients of the Essential Air Service. Well, you can think sort of analogous to that. We've got a $200 million fund now to fund what are essential ferries. And that money is also highly flexible and fungible to not only provide for capital investments, but for operations and maintenance. So I cannot impress upon you enough how sort of landmark that is. Under the previous existing law, Alaska did very, very well in terms of the formulaic distributions out of the Highway Trust Fund, out of the National Ferry Boat Program. You know, we're capturing a ton of money, and this bill builds upon that. Kind of switch gears over to the, you know, renewable side, dock electrification side. You know, there are a ton of monies into these programs that can fund competitive grants. So, you know, communities in Alaska have a lot of different needs. They apply to the RAISE grant program or the Port Infrastructure Development Program. Those programs have received a huge shot in the arm under this bill. So we're talking historic increases, $7.5 billion for the RAISE grant program. I believe $2.25 billion for the PIDP program. So that's, again, these are numbers that are much higher than the normal annual appropriations that are funded by Congress. So what that means is the pie is a lot bigger. There's going to be a lot more opportunity for competitive awards to Alaskan communities and Alaskan projects. And in our role, you know, is to support those projects where we can with the administration. And it's important to note that, you know, ultimately DOT, and it's actually the Biden administration that's awarding those funds. Sort of speaking philosophically from the congressman's perspective, I think we would all, and the House has undertaken in this FY22 approach process, the ability to do congressionally directed spending. But where this bill does not do that, it does make great strides in providing a lot of funds into these programs where projects for Alaska have been funded historically, and it stands to provide a ton more money. With respect to, you know, broadband and rural energy development, those are also, you know, provisions in the bill where programs have been beefed up to provide more funds. Again, those are going to be programs that are going to be implemented by the Department of Energy and other, you know, agencies within the federal government. So it'll take some time for those agencies, once the bill is enacted, to, you know, implement and disperse those funds. Generally speaking, those funds are put out through notice of funding opportunities and are competitively awarded. But again, I would say that, you know, Senator Murkowski and our team did a great job writing the rules of the road for those programs to really benefit and make eligible to the utmost extent Alaskan communities. And so that, you know, as, you know, past predicts future, we will do very well when these programs are ultimately implemented and the awards go out. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I think this is a historic bill. It's the congressman's, you know, perspective that we need to get this across the finish line. There will be a big, huge windfall for the state, and you know, to the extent we can moving forward, we will do what we can to assist the communities in accessing those funds, whether it's outreach to the different agencies, letters of support, et cetera. I'd also like to plug one other aspect as it deals with, you know, all different types of projects throughout the state. The Denali Commission receives a $75 million plus up in this bill, which is tremendous for a lot of rural Alaskan communities. Traditional annual appropriations for the Denali Commission are usually at $15 million a year. So a $75 million shot in the arm will go a long ways for the Denali Commission. And they have a lot of authorities and powers that make matching and different types of funding arrangements very accessible. So I always like to plug that group as someone who's really a good type of partner when you're, you know, thinking about infrastructure projects in your community. With that, I want to give you as much time to answer your questions. I'll stay on, and thanks for the opportunity again, and appreciate all the work everybody's done to bring this together.
Thanks so much, Kevin. We really appreciate that summary And we're moving in a new order now. I'm about to pass the mic to Caleb Froelich, Senator Murkowski's Chief of Staff. Thanks so much for being here tonight, Caleb. We agree really strongly that this bipartisan bill is a great start for Alaska, dealing with this transition moment that we're in and developing the infrastructure for another century, next generations to continue to prosper in this region. So Caleb, thank you so much for the work that Senator Murkowski has done on the bipartisan bill and working with her colleagues to craft the budget resolution that's upcoming. Tell us what, from your perspective in the Senate, what's coming next, what has already been a success and what is coming next?
Well, thank you, everyone. I apologize for being late. We had a couple last-minute items to assist the senator on this evening, so I apologize. I missed Kevin's talk, but hopefully I won't double up too much. It's great to be with so many folks from Juneau. I'm hoping to be home again in a few weeks here. Haven't been home as much as I'd hoped in this job with COVID sort of curtailing travel, but great to see familiar faces. So just to give a little bit of background, obviously, and I think Kevin probably covered some of the high level items, but obviously this is a historic piece of legislation. Senator Murkowski thinks it's probably the single most consequential bill that she's worked on in her 20 years in the Senate, especially just given the time that went into this and the timing of the bill, just with the struggles with COVID and hits to our various industries in Alaska. This shot in the arm, so to speak, will be so important for Alaska. So we'll be looking to Kevin and his boss there to get it across the finish line quickly in the House. I think that hopefully we anticipate the end of September, but Senator Murkowski has been consistently talking with her counterparts on the House side, Congressman Young, and also the group of moderate Democrats who have been working hard to ensure that this bill comes up for a vote separate from the budget reconciliation, because that's certainly important. Next in the Senate, well, we're hoping that there won't be a next in the Senate on infrastructure because it will pass as is. Kevin probably mentioned that, but we're obviously stand ready to address any changes that need to be made. We're hoping for somewhat more of a robust amendment process, but that didn't happen for various reasons. So if folks identify things that are missing or that could be supplemented or perfected, please let us know, and we're obviously happy to address those changes. There were, as with all these large pieces of legislation like the CARES Act and other things, there's imperfections that we do work to fix. So it's likely there's going to be a technical amendment package moving through sometime in the fall as well. So please keep us posted as you find things. But this is exciting for Southeast too, with the ferry system and obviously lots of money for broadband, for example. Will be $1.5 billion going to the state for broadband, and then an additional, we're expecting 250 million or more to go through on the tribal connectivity as an example. So nearly $2 billion to Alaska just on broadband, which will be certainly once in a generation funding on broadband. So ferries, airports, ports, things are all in great shape. As Kevin mentioned, Denali Commission's historic level of funding. I would also just put a plug in that we have a new federal co-chair of the Denali Commission, Garrett Boyle, grew up in Uzinki and Unalakleet, but most recently was Senator Murkowski's Deputy Chief of Staff. So very familiar with all the federal programs and how the Denali Commission works together with communities. So with that, I will stop there. I think Dana's from Senator Murkowski's office is on as well. So thank you to Dana for all her work as well, and look forward to talking with folks.
Thanks so much, Caleb. And we are about to move to the panel discussion of our night. And I'm appreciating that there's already some questions rolling in the chat. I really appreciate those questions. Do feel free to participate in the chat. Let us know how you think, but let's try to keep it constructive, positive. The focus of tonight's event is about, the title of the event is Infrastructure for Our Future. And what that means is, there's a diverse group of us here today, from folks that work in Congress to hydropower developers, utility leaders, CEOs, broadband experts. I'm a passionate environmentalist and climate change organizer, and we're really diverse, but we're all here together because we believe in building for a future that can continue to be prosperous for Southeast Alaska. And I have complete faith in my co-panelists here tonight that they're also here for that purpose. We all want to sustain Southeast Alaska as a prosperous place for our families to grow up, for people to live, and for this region to continue to be a beautiful and bountiful place. So we'll be directing questions to the panelists shortly, but let me introduce them. First up, we have Jody Mitchell, who is a good friend of mine and also the CEO of Inside Passage Electric Cooperative. And I'm going to keep introductions short so that we can focus on questions. But Jody and the rest of our panelists have, I could spend a long time introducing them. They're all very accomplished leaders, but I'll keep it brief. Next up, we have Chris Cropley, who is the broadband network architect for Central Council Tlingit and Haida. Thanks so much for being here tonight, Chris. He is working hard to expand broadband access in Southeast Alaska. We also have McHugh Pierre, the CEO of Goldbelt, whose corporation does a lot of work in our region, developing the local economy and creating a lot of jobs. Thanks for being here, McHugh. And last but certainly not least, we have Duff Mitchell, of Juneau Hydropower, who has been an advocate for expanding hydro capacity in the Juneau area for many years. And I'm going to remove my spotlight so you guys can focus on these panelists. Our opening question to let these great panelists kind of introduce themselves is, what do you see changing and growing in Southeast Alaska's infrastructure over the next 10 years? And after that question, we'll start taking questions from the audience. There's a few questions submitted beforehand. Jody, can I start with you? How do you see Southeast Alaska's infrastructure changing and growing over the next 10 years?
Yes, and thank you very much, Matt. I just have to say, Matt, I really appreciate your advocacy on our behalf. I'm the CEO of Inside Passage Electric Cooperative, and we serve the communities of Angoon, Hoonah, Cake, Klukwan, and the Chilkat Valley, which is basically 10-mile Haines Highway up to and including the Canadian and US border stations. We have been working on building small run-of-river hydro projects in our community to reduce our diesel consumption, because that diesel is our baseload power. And until just the past few years, IPAC was 100% diesel generation. And so I've been working really hard on trying to get us off diesel to the extent possible. We serve about 4,000 people in those communities, and there's 4 separate microgrids. And we have a very small staff. There's only 11 full-time people that serve all those communities. So we do everything we can to keep our rates as low as possible. We are a nonprofit, member-owned electric cooperative. I think we're the only one in Southeast that I am aware of. We built 2 hydros. We built the Gartina Falls Hydro in Hoonah, and it came online in 2015. And that's providing about 30% of the electric needs for Hoonah. We purchased the 10-mile Haines Hydro project. That we call it 10-mile because it really is at 10-mile Haines Highway several years ago. And we also built the Gunnock Creek Hydro project for Cake, which provides over half of their electric needs and sometimes even with diesels off, which is great, you know, when in high rain events. So we've been doing everything we can to reduce our carbon footprint. Unfortunately, it seems to be that the federal government still does not recognize hydro as clean renewable energy. And so that's been a real hard thing for us because these projects must be built with grant funding in order to reduce rates. I can't go and build hydro projects and borrow, you know, 10, 20, $25 million to build these projects and then raise rates. I'm sure I would be fired in no time. So, you know, diesel is our, like I said, our main source of power, but we're trying to, as frontline communities, using the Biden administration's wording, I'm hoping that we can get funding for more of these projects because we have 2 more in the hopper. One is the Thayer Creek Hydro Project for Angoon, which would provide well over 100% of the electric needs and a lot of the heating needs through air source heat pumps and possibly electric vehicles into the future. However, there's no money for those projects in the current bill that I have been able to identify. We need, you know, around $8 to $10 million per project in grant funding, or even more with the Angoon project. So anyway, to try to wrap it up, because I know I'm taking too long, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys know all of these things. I'm hoping that these projects will come online in the future so that we can continue our quest to reduce carbon emissions in our pristine environment in Southeast Alaska, and also to reduce rates to our members. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long.
You're great, Jody. There's so much to cover. Caleb, I see your hand up. I want to give you a chance to respond directly to Jody, if that's your intention.
Yes, thank you. Jody, I saw your question in the chat, and just to respond to your comment, there's significant grant funding for hydro specifically. I'll have our team send you the specific language, but there's $34 billion for carbon capture, storage, hydro funding, clean hydrogen, and civil nuclear credits. So there will be significant pots of money, both on the general side, and then there will be also additional tribal set-asides for hydro funding as well, and clean energy infrastructure projects.
Okay, well, and I really appreciate hearing that because I haven't seen anything that has said directly, and I have been in contact with our delegation, and so I'm glad to hear that maybe with the reconciliation bill that there is something in there to help us, because these are so important. Thank you.
This is all in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, separate from the reconciliation bill. We'll have our teams send that to you, Jody, so you have the specifics, but it is in there. We'll get it to you.
Okay, yeah, please do, because the interpretations that I've heard have not, there's no money in there for new hydro construction. It's all enhancing current infrastructure. And so I'd be glad for your offices to point out to me where that is so I can make sure that we apply. Thank you.
That'd be excellent, Caleb. Thanks for offering that information. That's what tonight is all about. And you know, SEACC's very interested in advocating for more hydro power as well. So love to get that information spread around this group.
Yeah, and if I can just add really quickly, I just sent Matt a letter that we got from NSRA for the Cake Hydro project, where it actually enhances the salmon habitat. And we've also had the same experience in Hoonah after the Gartina Falls project was built, that there's actually more salmon in the stream now than there were before we built the projects. So I just want to make it very clear that there is no harm to salmon. In fact, we've enhanced the habitat. I think that's important for this group to hear. Anyway, I will let someone else talk now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Chris, can I pass it to you? How do you see the infrastructure of Southeast Alaska changing and growing over the next 10 years?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Can you hear me all right? All right, I got a thumbs up. I'll take that. So how do I see it changing? I think we're already seeing a pretty big change in how people are using it. So I believe that the more people that use it, and when they start using it for work and for school, we will see more investment coming to infrastructure, as was mentioned earlier, the travel broadband connectivity program, which we put our application in today for that. We're looking at building out infrastructure throughout Southeast, towers, and buying direct internet. And with the availability of low Earth orbit satellites, it's really an amazing combination of money, people realizing the potential, and the technology all coming together at the same time, where we can take advantage of that. So someplace like Yakutat can actually get broadband internet now. And what happens when we have project managers working from home in Yakutat, or Carvers and Prince of Wales teaching master classes globally? It really shrinks the world all over again. I think we've all lived through the last few shrinkings, and I think we're poised for that again.
Thanks for that summary, Chris. I'm excited to have better broadband and more reliable service even here in Sitka. So thanks for the work that you're doing. Next up, we've got McHugh Pierre, CEO of Goldbelt. McHugh, how do you see infrastructure changing and growing in Southeast over the next decade? Oh, you're still muted, buddy. Here,
I'm off there. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate it. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and I love the engagement that we all have across the spectrum of the community. One thing that it's really cool to see is so many Indigenous representatives here, and Goldbelt represents the people from Juneau. We are Juneau's Alaska Native Corporation, but our shareholders don't just live in Juneau. They live all across Southeast. And the way I see infrastructure changing in the next 10 years is allowing us to be more connected. Right now, we're at a low point in our history. The ferry service is dismal. There's only 2 boats that are running. People have to rely on airplanes. It's very expensive. And if someone needs to go to a doctor's appointment or something from, say, Cape to Sitka, and they can't get on a plane, they're stuck. And it's just not acceptable. So the first thing I see is an enhanced, responsible, sustainable ferry service that has smaller vessels meeting the true need that are electric. Why can't we take advantage of what Jody's doing and what Duff is going to talk about doing? Electrify our docks, electrify our ferries, and let them go frequently at a low cost and low impact to our community, to our environment. We all subsist off of the environment, so we need to respect it, and it needs to be responsible the way we engage in developing it. And that's important for the next part of where I see us developing. I see us putting new terminals in more remote areas to allow connectivity to be a shorter route, a safer, shorter route. Goldbelt's interested in developing Cascade Point, has been working with DOT to do just that. We know where the historic sites are. That's Anksa land that we'd like to develop on. And we believe we can develop that in the most responsible manner to protect our sacred sites there and allow responsible traffic, daily traffic, electrify that dock, electrify our ferries, and let's get people moving, that isn't a sporadic schedule or something that's not sustainable or dependable. And that's really, I see the big difference there from communication and transportation to the way we generate that fuel to move us. It's going to be really exciting in the next 10 years. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, McHugh. I look forward to that dialogue around, how we can become more connected and, how we accomplish that. Duff, can you finish us off with your vision of how our infrastructure is going to change and grow over the next 10 years?
Sure, and thank you. And I really appreciate humbly being here. We live in a blessed area, Southeast Alaska, and
Yeah.
There's a Bible quote, for whom much is given, much is required. And we have the resources to really help ourselves go forward. So in the next 10 years, I see a massive and irreversible shift to beneficial electrification. What does that really mean? Beneficial electrification means the direct replacement of fossil fuels. In Southeast Alaska, we're blessed with hydropower, one of the few places in the world that can actually pull it off much easier than other places that would have to struggle. In Southeast Alaska, that means replacing diesel and gasoline for heating, transportation, and all industrial uses like fish processing and mining. Not only is this good for the environment, but it keeps our local energy dollars here local, and it creates jobs. The shift has already started, and it's just now accelerating. So visualize the future. That means we're going to see community-wide dock electrification. We're going to see mines that only operate on electricity. We see ferry conversions, like McHugh mentioned. And when I say ferry conversions, there's going to be a diesel hybrid battery generation. And by the way, BC Ferries, which is just south of us, runs a fine system, and they have 6 electric hybrid ferries, and they're looking to purchase 7 more because it actually saves their system money. It also means electric transportation, like Beth Weldon talked about, of our buses and school buses. And by the way, the infrastructure bill talks about a lot of money for school bus electrification. So we're going to see that move, and we're also going to see freight transportation and heavy equipment move to electrical. And it's not just good for our environment, but it actually reduces the operating costs. So we've already mentioned heat pumps locally, where Heat Smart's doing a great job. We're going to see a continued acceleration of that. Scandinavia has heat pumps, and they're in cold weather. And so it does work, and we're just going to see that more and more. So what does that mean to Southeast Alaska? That means we're going to need more hydropower, and we're going to need more high voltage transmission lines, submarine transmission lines, connecting places that have hydropower to places that don't. You know, and I just want to look backwards in the rearview mirror a little bit. This may sound a little space age or looking too far in the future, but just consider a short 7 years ago, Juneau had almost 0 electric vehicles, and now it has close to 600. You go to every parking lot. Now, if equipment and vehicle manufacturers racing out to put out electric equipment, the combination of market forces and governmental support means that beneficial electrification is not just a fad, and it's not something to bet against. So hydropower and beneficial electrification is clean, sustainable, and smart. And I'm here to say that in the next 10 years, it's not only here, but it's going to proliferate. So that's my kind of vision looking forward in the 10 years. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for tying it all together, Duff. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, folks. Perhaps predictably, we're running a little bit behind on schedule, but we're going to transition to my favorite part of the night, which is actually asking questions, answering questions from the audience. And I want to go all the way back to one of the first questions that was dropped from Bill Lady. And thanks for coming tonight, Bill. I appreciate all you do for the community. And I like this first question you asked. I'm just going to read it for the panelists. How shall we guide this Alaskan windfall so that it provides the greatest reduction in CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, and address our responsibility to help stop climate change? To take a little bit of liberty with paraphrasing. Is there anyone who wants to take a stab at answering that question? Yeah, go for it, Jody.
Well, I'm trying to remember the exact statistic, but I think for every gallon of diesel that is burned, it adds like 22.4 pounds of CO2 emissions into our atmosphere. Well, our communities are, you know, like I said, primarily diesel. We're working on trying to reduce that carbon footprint. But again, we need funds to help us do that. I'm sorry, I had hoped to prepare an estimate of the CO2 emissions that we have saved so far with the 2 hydro projects that IPEC has built, but remember, it was more than 10 million pounds of CO2 since, I think that was back in February, wasn't it, Matt, when we talked about that? And of course, every day that goes by, that number increases. But again, we have opportunities to develop more of these run-of-the-river hydro projects that will reduce our carbon footprint even more. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. And Caleb, I see your hand up again. I love that you're being so engaged. Yeah, tell us what you think.
Well, Bill, thank you for the question. I think that this bill does significant amounts for clean energy investments. I will send you, Matt, maybe to distribute to the group kind of an overview of everything that is in there. Just some highlights for folks that There's significant money for supply chains for clean energy technologies within the bill. There is money for fuel and technology infrastructure investment. As I mentioned, there's grant programs for carbon capture and storage, hydropower funding, clean hydrogen, and nuclear credit. We have also had some specific rural set-asides to help rural communities throughout the country, but especially in Alaska, where many of our rural communities are located. They will have separate set-asides for clean energy investment and infrastructure. So we think that there is going to be significant funding, as I mentioned to Jody, for hydropower as an example, as affordable clean energy. There's going to be a new $100 million program for the Bureau of Reclamation, for example, to establish small water storage projects only in Alaska and Hawaii. There's significant funding for energy efficiency and building infrastructure, and specific tribal, like as I mentioned, specific tribal set-asides for clean energy investment. So I think it's going to be great opportunities for Alaska on the clean energy side of the bill.
Thank you. And I want to use that to transition straight to another really good question that is related. Alex Jenkins asked recently in the chat, let me find it. And I think this is going to be for you, McHugh. Can you talk in more detail about the possibilities for electric ferries in Alaska? How long until you think they're ready? What are some of the challenges to launching them? Because that'll obviously result in a lot of cost savings and emission savings as well.
Yeah, I think the first way that we have to engage is making sure that we have enough capacity to charge all of our ferries, whether they're small 50 passenger or 100 passenger catamarans or larger car carriers. Right now, we don't have the electric generation to do that. And so once Jody expands, once Duff builds his project, we can start to have more capacity to fill that need. And then the second part is we can do this soon. We can do it starting next summer. We can take the money that Caleb has done such a great job providing for us and the congressional delegation to put in hybrid motors on our vessels. And so we can start running less diesel and more electric generation until we have that shoreside power ready to connect and build a more responsible way to move around the community. Thanks.
Excellent. I'm loving the questions coming in the chat, and we're going to try and get to all of them. There's one question that was asked ahead of time in the Facebook event that I want to offer to Chris. And Chris, the question was, I'm looking for the exact language here, but basically it was asking, how is this infrastructure bill, like how specifically is it going to help improve broadband access in Southeast Alaska? Like how are you going to use this money? What kind of things are you going to be doing to expand broadband access?
You bet. We're going to increase the middle mile backhaul, sorry, a little technical there, by purchasing low Earth orbit satellite bandwidth that has not been available. I kind of hinted on that before. It's a pretty big deal. It's super expensive, but it is dedicated bandwidth. We're also going to see Starlink come in, which is a middle and last mile solution and able to put internet where we can't run a cable. We haven't run a fiber optic cable, because it's $200 million for 50 people. I'd love it if we could. I mean, I've got the quote for that, and it's about $6 billion, which is 6 times more than the broadband connectivity program is right now. The infrastructure bill does have another $2 billion hopefully coming to it. Still, that's just for Southeast, or to get fiber optic. So fiber optic is not always the solution. There are some communities where there's a possibility for bringing fiber optic in, and that will, the life of fiber optic is about 20 years, give or take. And so we could see a few more communities get served that way. A huge part that we are a part of is the last mile. And that's exactly what it sounds like. And that's the connectivity from the central office or the tower where the internet comes in from the outside world, as it were, and we're brought to the home. There was a comment in chat about getting fiber north of a particular point in Juneau. We're able to put these towers out and bring high-speed broadband internet into the homes using the 2.5 gigahertz that spectrum that was awarded by the FCC to the tribes. And TNH has a pretty significant shapefile. We've started a consortium with 7 other tribes to build out that 2.5. So it's going to, it's really going to do something. Like I said in my first piece there, things are really coming together at a really fast pace and at the right time and with enough money. So if we do get this grant, we're going to see 30 plus new towers in Southeast Alaska. So we're buying bulk 10 years worth of internet from all the different providers. And with that kind of, we're going to see reinvestment. We're going to close that gap where it didn't make sense before because there weren't enough people paying enough money for internet. And we all know how much those bills are already for those of us who do pay that. So that it's going to be significant.
Hey, Matt, this is Duff. I'd like to just add on that, there's hardly any submarine cable built in the world today that doesn't have integrated fiber optics. So every place in the world where you see submarine cable being laid, it's an integrated resource. And so you're just going to see more and more broadband connectivity if submarine cables also take place.
That's excellent, Duff. And thanks for adding that. I love it when we can, what they call feed 2 birds with 1 stone. With 1 hand is the new way to say that old phrase. I just had another question for you. It was Jody mentioned earlier that there's been some struggle funding new hydroelectric construction sometimes. And I wanted to ask you, some say we shouldn't have any new hydro dams. How do you think Alaska could help shift that perspective and market the potential for clean, salmon-friendly hydropower? And then I love some of these questions that are rolling in. We will answer them just next, but first I want to hear from Duff on this question that was asked ahead of time.
Yeah, you bet, Matt. And that's a very good question. So in most places in the country, when you say the word hydropower, it's a 4-letter word. They automatically jump to the Hoover Dam and the Grand Coulee. They automatically jump that it's a fish-killing bad resource. And that is a tag that has come about over the years and it's grown. So what we have to do collectively from Alaska is educate, and also not only educate NGOs and environmental groups, but also not our congressional delegation, but other delegations that, we have a lot of small fish-friendly hydropower in Southeast Alaska and in Alaska. You're not going to build a hydropower in Southeast Alaska if you kill fish. You're just not going to get it permitted and licensed. So if we can help change the conversation to anti-hydropower, to hydropower displaces diesel when it's appropriately done. So if you have storage hydropower that puts water in at the base of the anadromous fish, you can actually do 0 problems to the fish. And in the case of Sweetheart Lake, we're going to increase the sockeye production by close to 300% by expanding the fish habitat. To put that in real dollar sense, we're probably going to bring $500,000 worth of additional sockeye value to the community of Juneau. Those are stories, and I'm not unique. There's other projects like Jody mentioned. They've brought extra fish back. You can design projects so that they're fish friendly and they're ecological engineered so that you're beneficial. So going back, what we can do is educate and get NGOs and other people that we're associated with to have them learn and understand that, hydropower is our answer for the renewable future. I want to say that wind and solar are coming about, and I think the technologies will increase, but they're not going to be readily available in the next 10 or 20 years here in Southeast Alaska. We need to be able to help people help us by approving and allowing wind and solar and hydropower that's small and fish friendly to be on parity. What I mean by parity, so that they get the grants and they get the tax incentives like Jody was talking about. Right now, wind and solar get a lot of grants and a lot of tax incentives. And we need to also enlarge the pot, not for all hydropower, but for fish-friendly hydropower and small hydropower. So Matt, that was a great question, but that's something we can do to help our congressional delegation, also inform other congressional delegations and NGOs so that they can in turn support hydropower in a strong manner.
I completely agree. And thanks for that well thought out answer. I love all the energy in the chat. Thanks, Jody, for answering Jean's quick question. We're going to have time for 2 more questions. One's coming right up, and then kind of a closing question. I'm going to combine these 2 related questions from Ian and Julie, and I'm going to summarize here. Basically, people are really excited for this funding. This is a great down payment on helping Alaska transition away from a fossil fuel economy towards a sustainable economy. But we're concerned about capacity to write these grants, apply for these federal funds. You know, many of these grants are competitive. We all live in small communities. We don't necessarily have dedicated grant writers. I know Jody is not only the CEO of IPEC, she has to write all the grants too. You know, we're used to these kind of grassroots operations in Alaska. But what can we do now to prepare for this windfall and position ourselves to apply for and receive these funds? As Ian says it, if a community has a near shovel-ready project, are there resources to help through the application process?
I mean, I'll sort of try to take this one initially. I appreciate the question because it's feedback that we receive across the board from a number of constituents on the grant programs that I oversee. And so this is one of those choices, right? So the Congress is providing a lot of funds programmatically to be dispersed competitively through the agencies. And because they're competitive awards, there's an added layer of, compliance and work that has to be done to access those funds. So that's, why the congressman, especially my boss, Congressman Young, prefers, congressionally directed spending or earmarks. They can kick the money to meritorious projects directly. That's something that wasn't contemplated in this bill, but the alternative is what we have here, and it's a lot better than nothing. So I would say what we try to do in our office is be as connected to the stakeholders as we can and push out the material as it comes from the agencies as they're implementing the law to you as soon as possible, so you get it on the front end. And so you're aware of when the awards are done during the federal fiscal year. And I would encourage folks in communities to reach out to maybe their regional corporation or another regional group, or combine forces with trade association or another, maybe a county, maybe a city and a borough team up to try and, do those things. But that's something that it's sort of an unfortunate aspect of how these funds are dispersed. But I do really want to stress that this type of arrangement is much better than not preferable in the sense of congressionally directed spending or earmarks. It's a lot better than nothing. And so we'll do our best to work hand in hand with those communities and get them the information that we can to make sure that they can at least give it a shot. We can't be your grant writer for you, but we can surely avail you of the information so that you have the most fair opportunity as possible, is what I'd say.
Thanks for that, Kevin. And I really appreciate the engagement that we've had from Caleb and Kevin. It's more than we were expecting, so thank you very much. I do want to switch to our wrap-up question. We could do an entire masterclass on, how to access federal funds. And Ian and Julie and anyone else, please feel free to reach out to me if you want help connecting to some of the resources or specific parts of the bill. But I want to switch to a wrap-up question for our 4 panelists. And I think we can all agree that the bipartisan infrastructure bill is a historic start. I think the fact that Senator Murkowski considers it one of the most consequential, if not the most consequential pieces of legislation she's worked on says a lot about the massive impact that this is going to have on our state. Also, there's a lot of changes coming to our economy, to our climate, to our workforce, and there are some areas where more is needed or would be beneficial. And so I want to wrap up with this question from Connor, who I am scrolling for it. He asks, what would be your number one priority for Southeast that you think could be included in the budget resolution? And I want to wrap up on that because it points us in a future direction for the work that still remains to be done. And maybe let's go in the same order that we started with. Jody, do you mind going first with that question?
No, you know me. I'm always going to advocate for our communities. So, you know, I really believe that our small rural communities, many of whom were left out with the original electrification of our more urban areas in Southeast, that they really need to have hydro as a to try to take over diesel as their baseload power. I just feel that, you know, we've been left out so much. And so I'm hoping that, you know, that like I said, that good funding comes to us. I'm a little skeptical, but I'm hoping that Caleb and Kevin can tune me into the places where we can get the funding to continue these projects. Because that will also lead to beneficial electrification in our communities as well, and just further reduce our carbon footprint. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Matt. Well, I think I already mentioned I want $6 billion for fiber everywhere, right? So we start there. I think, you know, tying up these LEO satellites will be significant. You know, there's with OneWeb, there's a band, and if somebody anywhere along that band claims that bandwidth, it's gone. This is a one byte opportunity. And then it would be nice to see some digital literacy standards. It would be really nice, you know, we've got the PE program or whatever. It would be nice to have some guidance there so that we kind of all knew where zero was when it comes on digital literacy etiquette and what's expected. You know, the 25.3 is, technically speaking, is, you know, great. You got 25.3. Why and what can you do with that? And you know, I could answer that for hours. So it would be nice if we all came together on that.
Thank you. McHugh?
Matt, I'd love to see some opportunity for us to connect our communities more on the ground as well. So we have an existing network of logging roads that we could be strategic in how we use those. So we can not only bring broadband across that space, but we could use our electric vehicles to move across that space as well to connect to those day ferries that are electric. All of this stuff is right within our reach. And for us to have the most you know, fulfilling quality of life, we have to have a low cost place to live too. And we all know Southeast is so expensive to live in, and it's hard for young families to develop. A lot of my friends are not like me. I moved to Southeast. A lot of young people moved away from Southeast. It's just very tough to live here. And if we can lower the cost of living by dropping that electrical kilowatt hour charge, if we can drop the cost of transportation and drop the cost of food, we're going to have a much better place to live. Thanks.
Thanks, McHugh. I'm right there with you on dropping the cost of electricity. Duff, do you mind on your finish us off?
Yeah, you betcha. These are great answers. And I would just turn the telescope around the other direction, because when you prioritize things, sometimes that means somebody's more important than others. And everything that's been brought forward today is really, really important for moving our Southeast Alaska forward. And just like in a basketball team or a football team, it's not a one-person event, it's a team event. And I see the broadband, I see, you know, small hydropower, I see better transportation, not only for moving people, but for freight. And this all ties down to, it's not only environmentally wise, but it has to be economically wise. And when you have green and rectangular green, you have a force multiplier. And I think we have it here in Southeast Alaska, and it's up to us to move it forward. So I think that it's a great question. And I think that all of the above I'm hydropower and I'm going to push my area for hydropower and transmission, just like the other people in their areas are going to push hard for their areas. But I think collectively together, we're more stronger when we're unified and pushing it together for a better region. Thanks.
That was an excellent wrap up, Duff. You're on deck to moderate the next one. I couldn't have said it better myself. I want to extend a thanks again to Caleb and Kevin coming in from our representatives. When I was told you guys would be joining, I was told you guys would be joining for like a 5-minute statement at the beginning. And I know you guys are super busy. You're probably on East Coast time. So thanks so much for putting in some extra time. And I want to offer, while our audience is still here, it's a few minutes after the hour mark, but if you have any closing statements you want to offer to the audience, I'd like to give you those moments.
Well, thank you very much to everyone. I sent Matt my email here, and we will answer all the questions that were in the chat that we did not get to for folks, and we can provide any additional feedback. If it's useful for folks to walk through any provisions like Jody's hydropower provisions, we will get specifics to everybody. And as I mentioned, and Matt just reiterated, this is a big deal for Alaska. We wrote it so it will take care of Alaska. The best example I can give is we wrote the Rural Ferry grant program to basically only allow money to go to 2 states. And so that's just an example that this bill is really for Alaska, and we will take care of everyone. So let us know how we can help. We're here to guide people and whatever we can do. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, hat tip to the Senate staff and the 2 senators who got a lot of great policy and a lot of great money directed to Alaska in this bill. Representative Young is to do everything we can to bring it home for the state, get it enacted into the law. And then, it's getting from point A to point B on the implementation side. So what we can do to be there and help everybody through that, stakeholders, not just in Southeast, but all across the state. We have an open door policy. I'll throw my email here in the chat. Make sure folks are available. I'll make sure we can get connected to my colleagues who, work on the other aspects of this bill. But I think, as Caleb said, it's a big historical shot in the arm in terms of money that will be coming to Alaska, and writing these provisions and getting the money steered to the state is no small feat in Congress. And I think, the delegation works really well as a team to get that done. And we'll continue to, provide as many federal resources with as much flexibility as we can for you to, use your local knowledge and local control to build the communities that you guys want for yourselves in Southeast. I think that's a big ethos that my boss has had for a long time, is that the communities know themselves best. And if we can help you help yourselves, that's what the goal is. So thanks again. It's my pleasure to be of service to y'all, and take care.
Yeah, thank you all of our panelists for participating tonight. I want to also thank JEDC. They did a lot of work behind the scenes to make this event happen. They hosted the Zoom, and we could talk about this topic for years, and we will, because this bill is going to impact our lives for years. There's a lot to work with in here. So I hope this is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning. And thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate it. I encourage you guys to, build off these connections that you made, to, if someone dropped their email in the chat, follow up with them if you want to ask them a question. I'm going to drop mine, and let this be the beginning of building infrastructure for Southeast Alaska's future, so we can keep prospering for another thousands of years.